Moshpit Passion, for the passion of music.
Hello and welcome to the Moshpit Passion Twitch channel. We're doing today a live stream event, playing some music, talking about music, the music industry, and yeah. And if you maybe miss the first couple of minutes, no problem. I will re-upload it on our YouTube channel. And our today's guest is Lyle McKeany from Pressure 425. Thank you for having you here in our Moshpit Passion stream.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So for you guys out there, you are asking Pressure 425. I never heard of them, but maybe you did in the last couple of days because I was promoting the band and the chat and their music on all kind of social media, on all kind of social media channels we have. And I'm telling a bit how I got into the music of Pressure 425. We talked before the start of it, and yeah, I was like every kid back in the day, a PlayStation gamer, and played Tony Hawk. And one of your songs made it on the record, on the sampler, on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 or 4 sampler. I don't know, I think it was 3.
I remember.
And I was like, whoa, what's it?
My memory.
I have to watch it, but it was Melt Me Down and was like, wow, it's such a good song. And somehow I was always keeping that song in mind, and many years went by, I guess around 10 or 11 years, and in 2013 I did a research on the internet, like on bands, old bands and songs, and I got in touch with Pressure 425 again when I was watching Beat the World or something like that. I guess it was a video clip to Beat the World, and I was like, whoa, they had another song, was Melt Me Down. And it was on the Tony Hawk track, and I ordered your record. I said it also before, for 3 cents on Amazon, and it was like, wow, it's such a good and a crazy and amazing record. And and around that time you released a blog entry about the whole music business, etc., and was like, wow, it's very interesting to hear something about the music industry, also how the time was back then. And yeah, also a lot of time went by. I contacted you a couple weeks ago, and now we are here to talk about Pressure 425 because I knew you have many fans out there. They are still active, asking what the band, what happened to the music, etc. And that's the reason why we are here. And the first thing I want to talk about is how did you, let me say, get together? Was it really when you went on college?
So our singer Adam and one of our guitarists Mark, they actually grew up together in Northern California, and then they both ended up going to college down there at UC Santa Barbara. And at one point, actually early on, Adam's brother, whose name is Chris, was another guitarist in the band. He didn't last very long. He was an okay guitar player, but not amazing. And his heart just wasn't really in it, so he ended up leaving. But at the time, I think I was in like a chemistry class or something with some totally other guy whose name I don't even remember. And he played guitar, I played bass, and we were like, hey, let's jam sometime. And he contacted me and said, hey, I'm having like these other people over, and one of them was I was like going to his house, just like in the little college town next to the university. And one of the other people there was our original drummer, Jake Fowler. And we had a fun time jamming. It was like just jamming, playing random stuff. But afterwards, Jake kind of pulled me aside and he said, hey, I just tried out with this other band that's really good. And he's like, but their bass player is not very good. So he's like, if you'd be interested, because he liked, how I played or whatever, and we jammed pretty well together. I think like a couple of weeks went by or something, and then he called me up and he said, hey, let's why don't you come over and hang out? And so I went to their practice studio and met Adam and Mark and Chris, and then Jake was there. And we kind of hit it off like right away. They had a couple things they were working on, little like song ideas, and I was able to kind of jump in pretty quickly, and they liked my sound and just liked me in general. So we're like, hey, let's keep jamming. And so we did, and then like I said, Chris ended up leaving. I think we played maybe 1 or 2 shows with him, something like that. I do remember our very first show. We actually covered a Deftones song. Oh my god, it was like one of their first big songs. I can't remember right now. But what's that?
Was it Bored?
Yes, yeah, that was it. Yeah, so we covered that our first set because we were supposed to do a half hour or something, and we didn't have quite enough material. So we're like, hey, let's just learn this song. And that was the only time we ever played that song, actually. Yeah, so I think we played a couple shows with Chris in the band, and then he ended up leaving, and I think he even like moved somewhere else, like across the country eventually. But yeah, so then we were still jamming, and then at that time it was kind of I think even at our first show, Joe, our other guitarist, Joe Schmidt, was there in the crowd, and he came up and he was just like, hey, I like what you guys are doing, and he was spinning records at the time. He's like, I have a whole DJ setup, and like, I hope you guys would be interested. And we're like, yeah, come hang out. So he actually came to the studio, and we were trying to work in like different sounds he could make with his turntables, which was kind of a popular thing at the time. Like there was like Limp Bizkit had that, and I think some other groups would kind of mess around with that. I guess even the Deftones eventually did that. They had their DJ. Yeah, so we even played some shows like that, and that's kind of the genesis of the name in some ways. Originally, we were called Pressure Shift.
Yeah.
But then we didn't like that as much, and so we ditched the shift part. But then there was a band in LA called The Pressure, and we were like, well, let's avoid any confusion. But the way the 4 and the 5 got added it was sort of a joke, because Joe was in the band, but he sometimes he just wouldn't show up to the show, and even to practice and stuff. So we always joked like we either had 4 or 5 people. So it was like Pressure 4 or 5 came from that idea, and it was sort of a joke, and then it stuck. But eventually we were kind of like, we don't know if we really like the sound of the DJing aspect of it. Didn't feel like it was adding a whole lot. And then Chris left the group, and then Joe's like, well, I play guitar, and he's like, Joe's into like really heavy music, which surprised me that he even DJ'd at all, to be honest. But so he's into really pretty heavy stuff, and so we were like, yeah, come on, hang out. He already had all his gear and stuff, so we started working around that, and then after that, he stayed around. He never missed a show after that.
Nice.
So that's sort of the genesis of the band, yeah.
And how did you get the record label contract back then? I mean, you released End Technology, I think.
Yeah.
Was
we
it?
Did that EP on our own. We just funded it on our own and recorded it with some friends that we had met who had a little studio. It was kind of a funny little place. It was up over the hill from Santa Barbara where we lived. But they called it Pig Turd Alley because it was on this like ranch or farm that their parents owned.
Yeah.
And they had this little like extra house, and they built the studio on there. It was actually a pretty cool spot, just to kind of be out on our own working on that. And they charged reasonable rates, so that helped. Yeah, so we did that on our own, and it was, I think, Jake. I'm trying to remember how it worked, but I know we at one point got in touch with like a entertainment lawyer guy who helped us with some stuff. But then what really made the difference was Jake had a neighbor, and he was buddies with the guys that ultimately became our managers, because one of our managers grew up in Santa Barbara, and that was where we were based. And so the guy had grown up with them, or like went to high school with them or something, and introed us to them. They still run to this day. They run a indie record label called Side One Dummy.
Yeah.
And they had never managed a band up to that point, but they were like thinking about getting into it. So they came to saw us play a show down gosh, I want to say it was, God, I don't remember. It was somewhere in Southern California near LA, and that's where they're based. And they, came backstage and they're hanging out with us and just like, hey, we really like what you guys are up to, and think it has some potential. And so then they actually helped us get into a more legit studio down in LA with a producer named Ed Stasium, who's like kind of a legend in the industry. He did like a bunch of the old like Ramones records back in like the 80s and stuff. And he helped us record, I think it was like, there's at least 2 songs. It might've been a 3-song demo, something like that. So we recorded Beat the World Again, and we kind of rearranged stuff a little bit. And then Bill, our managers, Bill and Joe, they took that and shopped that around to everyone they knew. And I think the funny thing is, I know before we talked, I mentioned briefly the manager for Alien Ant Farm and Reg and Papa Roach. I actually ran into him it was probably 8 years ago now, something like that, at a show in Sacramento at a club that he owns called Ace of Spades. It was funny because I saw him walking around and I was like, why do I know this guy? And it finally clicked. And so I went up to him and I was talking to him. I was like, just catching up. And then he proceeded to tell me that he basically he made the intro to DreamWorks for our managers. And he ended up getting like a finder's fee for that, which I had no idea about. So like all these years later, I was like, really? I don't know how much he made, but I was like, he probably had some percentage of if we had done really well. But it was so funny because I had no idea about that. Never heard about that before. So I don't know if it was intentionally kept from me or if I just failed to remember it. But yeah, so he made the intro to the same A&R guy named Ron Handler, who did both Alien Ant Farm and Papa Roach at the label. And yeah, it was just like they were the first to kind of bite. There was another guy at Maverick Records, that's the label that the Deftones are on, or were on. I don't know if they're still on it. And it was the label owned by Madonna. But it was like a guy who one of our managers was friends with, and he really, really wanted to sign us. And he got us backstage to a Deftones show in LA and everything. It was trying to schmooze us and stuff. But ultimately we went with DreamWorks because they were the first, the first to really go, okay, we believe you guys, we think you could do great things. And and I think it helped that, our buddies in Papa Roach had, obviously signed with them, and then we're looking like things were going to go really well for them. It was still, I think it was before their single came out, but it was maybe right around that time it just come out. But yeah, we were like, we want to do what they're doing, and so we did end up doing a lot of similar things as them, even like same producer, same studio, that kind of stuff. So we were trying to kind of replicate their success in some ways. I mean, obviously we sound a lot, not a lot different, but enough different that it was distinctive from them. But we thought, this was like maybe a formula for some sort of success.
And how did you feel back in the time when new metal was the major, let me say, rock thing that was working on, and the sound of your band was also connecting to this? Was it something where you say, yeah, we are fine with that, or was it like, nah, it doesn't fit at all?
Yeah, I don't think any of us really ever liked that genre name. And yeah, I mean, I think we always felt like we were a little bit different. Because I mean, there was so many bands within that genre at that time, and there were so many just not good bands.
Yeah.
There was definitely some really good bands, though. Don't get me wrong, and some of them, we were able to become friends with and things like that. But there were so many others that just made the whole scene just like, some of them weren't that great. So we felt a little different. I think some of our stuff was a little bit more radio friendly, or just more easy to a little less like screamy and stuff like that. and we didn't really lean into the whole like rap rock thing too much. There was maybe a tiny amount of that, but you know, we had like more singing, like actually like legitimate singing, and not just kind of rapping or screaming, you know. And we were like, oh, let's go for like this more melodic approach, but it was still very like guitar riff driven, and there's no guitar solos really. There's like other sounds and stuff, but it was not like traditional rock in that sense. So I guess that's kind of why we got put into that genre box, if you will, because that was kind of the style then. It was less like, you know, oh, here's the, you know, the bridge with the guitar solo, you know, less going on. So
I talked to the bassist of Nino a couple years ago, and he also said, yeah, I don't care so much at all about this term new metal. And if you look closer into this new metal scene, each band is sounding different. It's not like today's metalcore, for instance. Like I said, and everybody here is knowing, Moshpit Passion is also a magazine, and we got so many let me say, how can I say it? A promo copies, digital promo copies of metalcore bands. They sound all the same. They got this gent sound, sound of war, same producer, and everybody's like, yeah, we want to sound like this band, but this, let me say, blueprint is everybody coping. So if I compare that to the new metal era, it's like Pressure 4 to 5 is not sounding like Slipknot or Static X. No, it's something on its own. And also, very bands, or at least most bands I know, are telling what you are saying. Like they didn't feel so comfortable that they are connected with bands like, I say, Mudvayne with all these paint faces, or Static X or something like that. They are like, no, we are doing something on our own. It doesn't fit. I think Deftones is the best example from that era, which is still around and saying, hey, we are never fitting to this, and we are doing also still something completely different on every single record. So you can't fit us in a genre somehow.
Yeah, I mean, you even look at that time, like what were the big bands? It was the Deftones, Korn, and like Limp Bizkit were like probably three biggest ones at that kind of that snapshot of time. And like even just those three are like wildly different, you know. I mean, I think for maybe just like a casual popular music listener, it's like, okay, they all sound like distorted guitars and heavy, and so maybe that's why they get lumped together. But if you're like into heavier rock music, you're gonna like find totally different things on just those three bands, right? Like, yeah, you're gonna get the more like angsty, maybe whiny Jonathan Davis, and then you get like the Limp Bizkit, and he's kind of like bro-y and like rapping, and it's kind of, in my mind, it was sort of corny at times, but then the Deftones was like kind of like had this almost like ethereal feel to it at times, you know, with Chino's vocals being just like completely different than those other two guys, you know. So, and that's just three bands right there that were like probably one of the more popular ones then. But then, you know, you had others emerging out of that time too that went on to like, you know, become much more mainstream, like a Linkin Park or even like Incubus, which Incubus even got lumped into this kind of almost new metal sound, especially with their first record, even though it was like so different and sort of experimental in a sense, their first record. And then they kind of went a little bit more poppy after that, but they sort of got lumped into that too. Like we played shows with them and stuff too. So yeah, it was definitely interesting. Yeah, because I think everyone we were friends with and knew around that time probably felt similarly about the genre, just kind of like, I don't even know what new metal means, you know? And it was sort of cheesy, I thought too, because it was like, you know, the U with the umlaut over it, you know, like, and I'm like, what does that even mean? You know, like from an American's point of view, it's like, I don't know what the point of that is or how that even started.
Yeah, it's something typical German that we have these kind of umlauts in our alphabet and using this very often. And so we are always asking, so, hey, it's an English term, so how English-speaking people are pronouncing that, you know, who came up with that?
Yeah. I don't know.
So,
The only reason I even knew it was an umlaut that I took German in high school
yeah.
for some reason. Yeah, I was one of those. I think I took it for 2 years, and it was funny because I grew up in California in a town called San Jose,
Mm.
and I'm like, why did I take German when it's like obviously I should probably take Spanish given like the city I live in is a Spanish word, you know. But yeah, I don't remember much of it. But
Okay.
I do remember what umlaut is.
Yeah. Can you still say some German words?
I mean, not very much.
Okay.
You know what's funny is the one phrase that I thought was hilarious when I was in high school,
Yeah.
and it's not even something people would say. I think it's like I think you're saying like you're asking someone to please count or something, but it was like bitte zählen Sie.
Yeah.
Is that what that means?
It's right. Yeah, yeah.
Will you please count?
Can you please count?
And I was like, I don't know why that sounded really funny to me to like yell out really loudly, like you're angry. I don't know why that stuck with me all these years.
Yeah, everybody is saying that, especially from America, that the German language somehow they're connecting this. For example, with Rammstein, with the band, it's very strong, angry, and powerful. And yeah.
And you just reminded me of a story. So we played. I'd be curious if you know this actually. So we played with Jared Leto's band, 30 Seconds to Mars,
Yeah.
a few times, but they played under a different name originally, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the band before they changed it. But if you ever come across that, please let me know. I've spent way too much time Googling that, and I found it. But I remember we played a few shows with them before they like got a lot bigger, but we went to go see Korn. Actually, we went to see Korn play at this. I think it was at the Forum in L.A.
Mm.
And it's like a big stadium where the Lakers used to play. The Los Angeles Lakers basketball team used to play. And Rammstein opened for them. And I remember we were in the hallway and we saw Jared Leto and some of the other guys from that band. We were chit-chatting with them. And I remember right after that, we walk into the concert hall and Rammstein had just started playing and we see their singer like on the mic. I don't even remember what he was saying, but he's like got his arms out to the side like this and he's like completely on fire. And I was like, what is happening? They put on a really good show. Man, it was pretty crazy.
Mm. Yeah, they are now the biggest German international act, and they should play in the biggest also stadiums in America this year. But I saw yesterday it was cancelled, the whole tour. So it's like, what? A German band, I think it was last time Scorpions, they were very big 20, 30 years ago, that he also plays stadiums from our country, but especially Rammstein, it's like, wow, that's crazy. And also the show, I saw them 2 years ago, completely over the top. I don't know if you saw the current live video clips of them, but their stage buildings like Mötley Crüe, completely over the top.
Yeah, it's definitely entertaining to watch for sure.
So yeah, I want to talk a bit about the year 2001, because it was a special year. I did a research, and it was also the last wave, let's call it new metal, where a lot of bands released records, for instance. And after that year, a lot of bands went on hiatus, I don't know, broke up, etc. And also 9/11 happened this year. Can you tell us the whole year 2001 for you as a band? What happened, and also, the impact of 2001. And also a question is, why didn't you did a tour? Sorry for my English. Didn't do a tour. Yeah, didn't do a tour in Germany, for instance, or Europe.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, 2001. So we signed the record deal at the end of 2000. I'll never forget the date because it's really easy to remember. It was November 22nd, 2000. So it was, well, I guess you would go 221100 for the date. So really easy to remember when we actually signed the deal. And so yeah, we spent kind of the early part of 2001 figuring out, where we're going to record the record and who we're going to do it with and stuff like that. And so we spent a good chunk of I don't remember the exact time frame, but we were living down in LA at some like apartment kind of complex place. Well, backing up just slightly, so at the time Jake, who was our drummer, we actually fired him because he had some health issues. Like he had a tendonitis in his hand, and his doctor had told him, I'm pretty sure his doctor said like you shouldn't play drums for like a year. And we were like, well, that's not going to happen. Because we just signed a record deal. And so we spent, and we had some disagreements and stuff with him, and he was a bit difficult to work with at times. So we decided to move on. And so we found, I remember I'm pretty sure I asked my brother if he wanted to play drums with us. My brother was in another band at the time that I ended up joining later called Ambionic. But yeah, I can't remember if I asked him before or after we did the record. But anyway, we ended up finding a studio drummer. His name's Brooks Wackerman, which is like the greatest drummer last name ever, Wackerman. Yep. So he was like a studio guy. He still plays. I know he was the drummer for Bad Religion for a long time. It might even still be. But then, so we got him. He came in to like this practice studio, and we were working on the songs with him, and then working with the producer as well, because we did some rearranging of some songs to kind of tighten them up and things like that. Including Beat the World, we changed the structure of it a decent amount. I don't know if you've heard the version that was on the And Technology EP.
Yes.
It's quite a bit different. So we, trimmed it down, kind of, he helped us hone it in a little bit better. So we did that. Then we got in the studio, and I think we were in the studio for probably close to a month or so, working through all the songs and then doing the mix and master and all that. So, but then we hit the road at one point, and our first tour, like a legitimate real tour, was with Dredge and Hoobastank. It was all of us. It was all our first tour, if I remember right. And so we toured around kind of the Western United States a little bit. And then I think we had a little time off, but then we went back out on the road and flew out to Florida to start Ozfest. And so we were on Ozfest actually before our album came out. We did the second half of Ozfest. So it was like, I think it was most of August, if I remember right. It was like the hottest time of the year, playing on the East Coast. And that very first show was in Tampa, Florida. And it was like, I don't even know how hot it was, but it was like 90 something degrees Fahrenheit and humid, and our guitars kept going out of tune, I remember. So but it was so fun because we played in front of like, it was probably 5,000 to 10,000 people that first time. And it was just amazing, out in this parking lot of this giant stadium. Yeah, so that we played that tour, and then on that tour we played like some off date shows with Taproot and Nonpoint. Pretty sure Nonpoint there. And so we'd go play clubs like on off dates of Ozfest, go play other clubs and stuff. So that was all up and down the East Coast. We played even like a show in Toronto, Canada. So we did all that, and then in September, we hit the road again, just on like a West Coast tour. I don't remember who we were on the road with then, but that was right when our single was hitting radio. So our single hit radio just like a few days before 9/11. So I remember we saw our video on MTV2, like one of the hotels we were at, like a few days before 9/11 happened. We were in Portland. We had just played a show in Portland the night before 9/11, and then woke up, and I remember my phone was like buzzing on the on the dresser next to me, or the table next to me, and it was like early for us, and I'm like, who the hell is calling me, And it was our friend Jason, and he just left a message. He just said, I just remember he just said, turn on your TV. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? So I turned on the TV, and it's like obviously see all the stuff going on with 9/11, and it was like very surreal, of course, like it was for probably anyone in the world, but definitely for Americans. And then we had a show in Seattle that night, so we drove up to Seattle, and it was like a ghost town. There was nobody out. It was really weird, just eerie. And then our show got canceled, which didn't surprise us. And I remember going out to eat, and we found like one restaurant that was open, and it was like way too fancy for us, but we didn't care, and nobody else seemed to care. But it was just an awkward time. And it was one of those where like at that moment you're going like, I think it's going to have some sort of impact on us personally, even though we were on the whole other side of the country. But it's like everyone was glued to the news on TV, and like nobody really cared about a new band at that time. So, but like a lot of wheels were in motion as far as promotional efforts and things like that from the record label. And we had a publishing deal as well. And they helped with different things, like try to get us in TV and movies and things like that. And so a lot of that stuff was in place. Interviews were lined up, all that kind of stuff. And so, we tried to make a go of it, because our album didn't actually come out until I think it was October 2nd, if I remember right. So it was, a good 3 weeks after 9/11. But, at that point, it was just like all of the promotional stuff that didn't really work like it should have, or we expected it to. And, it was definitely a huge factor as to why we weren't as successful as we could have been. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, there's no way you can plan for it, and even like the guys in Hoobastank, I remember their album came out, and I want to say it was in November. So it was just like even just a month or a little bit more later. And they did much better. Granted, they were a little bit more poppy and, accessible than we were. But at the same time, I think a lot of it had to do with the timing, because, at that point, the news had died down a little bit from 9/11, just being all anyone was thinking about for a while. So, but at the same time, I think it was in November as well. We played a show in New York City, and it was at this place. It doesn't exist anymore. Now it's actually the building where it was at is actually a Hard Rock Cafe location, but it was called The World, and it was a venue owned by the World Wrestling Entertainment, which is, it was kind of funny, but it was like this really awesome music venue. It was like they had top of the line everything, and it was like just really cool, because you could walk out the front door and just like look up to your right, and you could see the Jumbotron, like famous New York Times, right where the touristy spot. But so it was a cool spot, and I remember playing that show, and it was like, it felt like no other show we had ever played. It was just a totally different kind of vibe with the crowd. In a way, it felt like they were just like thirsty for something that would take their mind off of what had been going on in the city. And I remember all of us talking about it afterwards, going like, something felt different that show, and it felt like we just sort of helped people take their mind off things for an hour or something, so that was a cool experience. But then after that, it was like, we tried to release Melt Me Down as another single, but the label spent way less money on that to try to get it out there, and it never really took off. And it's one of those things where, I think we had that chance to really blow up, and it didn't really happen. And then, the music industry started changing a lot. And I think that's part of why, like you mentioned, there's a bunch of different bands that came up at that time or had albums at that time, and then they kind of fell off. I think it's partially 9/11, and just I think a lot changed in this country on 9/11, and it still kind of lingers to this day in some ways. But there was that, and then the music industry changed a lot. I remember we would get asked in interviews a lot about Napster, you know, and what was going on with that and how we felt about it. And at the time, we didn't really care because we just wanted people to hear our music. We didn't care how they got it. You know, we just wanted to more and more people to know about it. But it was right around that time when like the drummer from Metallica, Lars, was like making headlines with his whatever he did to like try to combat Napster, and so it was definitely a concern in the industry. I know that. And even later on when I joined that other band and we were trying to make a go of it and try to get management, things like that, it was like the water got very cold all of a sudden, and it was hard to get meetings even. And so I think ever since then it's been harder to get that, like, the backing from the big labels and things. So, but there were definitely some of those groups that, did well or hit it big before that, or like right around then, and they kind of hang around for a while too. But yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, part of it also is just, it's that's how the music business works in a lot of ways. Like you'll see a lot of groups come up, but then, only a handful will stick around for a long time.
And what happened after the release, especially in 2002? If I get it right, for instance, at the end of 2002 or the beginning of 2003, you left the band. Is it right?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact timing, to be honest. I was talking with my brother, who I'm really close with, and he plays drums, and he's in a different band. He was in a different band at the time that I mentioned earlier called Ambionic, and I really liked what they were doing. It was more along the lines of a dredge kind of sound, a little bit kind of more artsy, or I don't know what to call it. And at that point, it was also, we were doing in Pressure 4-5, we were doing recording demos and things like that in our practice studio and writing songs. And because we still had a record deal, the deal we signed was a 2-album deal minimum, and then there were options for the label to do additional albums if they wanted. But we kept sending demos to our A&R guy, and our managers and stuff, and oftentimes it would be like, yeah, cool guys, yeah, just keep writing, and we're like, okay, they don't like it, and so we kept trying different things, and I think ultimately they were looking for like even just one song where they go, okay, this has like commercial potential, and they could then he could justify rallying the people at the label to put a bunch of money behind us, but if without hearing that one song that could maybe make that happen, then we weren't getting that second record to come out, and then in the meantime we were, like a bunch of us had to like go back to work because we needed to make some money, and it's like the way the record industry works. You get an advance of money, at least when you do a major label, you get an advance of money to start, but it has to last you until you get the next one, which in our case, is a couple of years. So, I think we probably made something like $100,000 each, which sounds like a lot of money, but if it has to last you 2 years, it's not that much money. So, yeah. So, I mean, granted, we would make some money here and there off of like merchandise and stuff, but not that much, not as much as some other bands. So, yeah, I mean, it's a hard bargain, and then you have bills due and stuff like that too, and trying to make it work. But ultimately, I decided to leave because I joined my brother's band, and I thought there was a lot of potential there, and I really liked the music, and some of the music we wrote together after I joined is like some of my favorite music that I've made, that I've heard. And yeah, so we tried to make a go of it, and I was still friendly with the guys in Pressure 4-5, and I think they got another bass player at one point, and I think they even switched drummers at one point again. And from what I understand, I think Adam, the singer, just eventually said like, "Hey, I'll give it this much time, and if it doesn't happen, then I'm going back to school." And yeah, just like nothing ever panned out. So, but from what I understand, they also tried to go maybe like a little bit on the heavier side with some of the newer music. Whereas, and I think I don't remember exactly, but I remember Joe, the guitarist, was pushing for that quite a bit because that's what he was into. And I was kind of going the other direction, not necessarily like poppy, but just going like, hey, they want to hear, like, if we want to actually get this other record made, they're going to want to hear something that they think could be a hit of some sort. So we should probably lean into that a little bit. But, you know, obviously still make it something that we really like. You know? So there was definitely some tension there, creative differences, if you want to call it that, that led to me leaving as well. You know, but I have to say though, like there's times where I still think back and I kind of go like, wow, what if I had just done both of the bands at the same time, you know, and kept trying to make a go of it. But, you know, I think at that time I just made the decision that seemed right to me, you know, but I think looking back with, you know, 2020 hindsight, as they say, it's one of those, like, I don't think I fully realized how lucky we were to be in that position.
Yeah.
And how hard it is to get to that position. You know, that being said, though, I don't know how much would have changed. I think we would have maybe just continued writing songs, and then it would have been a very similar outcome. Because, like I said, the industry was changing a lot. They were, you know, I can't think of very many bands after that time that got like significant, like rock bands in that similar genre that got similar investment. Not very many.
Papa
There's
Roach?
definitely like a more, well, I mean, but they already had their deal and they already had like a blowout success. You know? Like they sold something like 5 million albums off of that first album, the Infest album. But that was before ours came out. But I'm thinking, like, was there a new band after that time that came out that got, you know, like a significant record deal and blew up really big? I mean, there was definitely some like, there was like an indie band like resurgence sort of around a little bit after that, like the Strokes and bands like that came up that got pretty big. But I can't think of very many like heavier acts that came out after that time that did really well. You know, especially on like a commercial, like, you know, popular, like regular radio stations. Kind of, I don't know how to say that, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many there were, because yeah, I mean, it's like the investment for that from the major label record standpoint changed quite a bit.
And do you saw, I don't know, it was a couple of months ago, I think it was around December, that somebody uploaded the hidden demos for your second record?
Yeah. What's funny is most of those songs I had never heard because they wrote them after I left. Maybe I was involved early on, but I don't really remember. But there was a couple on there that I remember being a part of. The funny thing is, I have another song in my Dropbox or something that wasn't on there, so they must have scrapped that later on. So I might upload that at some point. We'll see.
Do you ever talked about that? Maybe to re-release all never released demos on a CD or something like that?
We've never really talked about that, no. Like I didn't even know all those existed, really. Pretty sure Mark, one of our guitarists, had them from, because I came across that video. Actually, my brother found that video. I don't know how he found it, but but I saw in one of the comments they said that Mark commented on them or something, or I think he shared them. But yeah, I mean, some of them sound pretty rough because they were just recorded in our practice studio, you know. But like none of those were done in like a professional studio. They were just things that it was like we were trying to get the general idea across to send them to our A&R guy at the record label. So then, you know, if he greenlit them, then I think we could have done maybe like, you know, a little bit a little bit nicer sounding demo, on a couple of songs or something like that, and then he could have used that to kind of pitch it internally at the record label to try to get support for us, but never really got to that stage. Certainly never was talk about doing an actual full-on album, as far as I know.
And did you ever talk about a reissue on vinyl for Burning the Process, or I don't know, recreating some merch design, something like that?
I don't even know if we can do that because we don't actually own. I don't own the music anymore. Universal Music Group bought DreamWorks, because DreamWorks doesn't exist anymore.
No.
They exist as a movie production studio, but not in the music space anymore. So Universal owns all that stuff. So I think they own the masters and everything. So if they want to do something like that, they could do it. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know how that would work, to be honest, or how much appetite there is for it either. Yeah.
Because I know here not in Germany, in the Netherlands, there's a record label which is producing things on vinyl. It's called also, I forgot it. The short form is MOV, Music on Vinyl, obviously. And they're requesting, for instance, fans for submissions. And then they will set it up everything, because they got all kind of contacts and released, for instance, the first Taproot record, Gift, for instance, of 2 years ago or something. Or Snot is also a band. Okay, they're more punk hardcore-ish, where the singer Lynn died also 22 years.
Those guys actually.
And
they practice in the same practice studio as us.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. It was this place in there's a little town next to the college at UC Santa Barbara called Isla Vista.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of bands that played there, but there were these two buildings that were like they looked like storage units. And we had a studio upstairs in one of them, and then we eventually moved to one of the downstairs ones that had like a garage door that you could roll up and down. And they were in the building across the way from us, and they would practice. And then I don't know if you know the band Ultra Spank, those guys.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they were also in one of those too. And so a bunch of the bands all practiced there. But I remember meeting Lynn and some of the other guys. I'm trying to remember their guitarist, Mike something.
Mike Dowling.
I don't remember. Yeah, he was super nice. I was throwing a tennis ball to Lynn's dog that's on the cover one day. I remember that. And yeah, it was pretty tragic when he died. It was shocking. I only talked to him briefly, but it was definitely like, it hit the music scene pretty hard in that area. I know exactly where it happened and everything. It's like a spot I pass all the time on the freeway down there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's like every time I pass that, which I don't do it anymore that much because I don't live down there, but every time I would pass it, I'd think about him. Pretty tragic. But you reminded me a second ago. You mentioned the Netherlands and Germany and stuff, and you had asked me about Europe.
Yeah.
So that was one of those things. I always wanted to tour Europe. I know, like the guys in Dredge played a lot over there, and they loved it. And for a long time, I was like, I want to go over there, and the label just like never even released our music over there. It was one of those. They spent so much in the U.S. on us. I mean, it was definitely north of $1 million that they spent on us. So I think it was just hard for them to justify doing that. But I think we would have found a really good audience over there. And it would have been a lot of fun. But yeah, it never materialized. We only time we ever played outside of the U.S. was like a couple dates during Ozfest. We were supposed to play in Vancouver, Canada, one time, but it's kind of a funny story. We played in Seattle at this place. It's a really cool spot. It's called the Jimi Hendrix Experience Museum, and at that time it was pretty new. But it's got like all this cool like music memorabilia and stuff like that. But they set up a stage inside there, kind of like near the entrance, and it was like awesome. Like it was just a cool spot, and it was a really good show. And I remember Adam, which he never does this, but for some reason he decided to stage dive. And I was like, I remember playing, and I was like, what the hell is he doing? He never does that, you know?
Mm.
And so then he comes off the stage, and, you know, we're backstage, and then he's like, oh shit, my wallet. Like, he had a wallet with a chain and everything.
Yeah.
And it got stolen off him.
No.
So he had no identification whatsoever. And we were supposed to go to Canada the next day. So I was like, we were like, well, this isn't going to work. Yeah, they're not going to just let him in.
No.
So we had to cancel. We skipped that show. I think that was when we were on tour with Alien Ant Farm.
Mm.
Yeah, and so we actually, I remember we drove straight from Seattle to Denver, which was like 26-hour drive or something.
Mm.
But we drove straight through. We didn't stop, and because we wanted to. He had to go to like a passport office or whatever and get like a new ID and everything. But yeah, it was. I'm like, why did you have all your stuff on you like when you're on stage? You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny. But anyway.
It's crazy. It's interesting that you mentioned Alien Ant Farm and also Papa Roach, and that you are somehow connected together because both bands toured here in Germany. And Ant Farm, well, they built also an audience, but you guys never did that. And this leads me to our next chapter, your big blog entry in 2013, which was blowing up all over the internet. I can remember that, where you said, "Hey, we got $100,000, but please do the math," and you explained everything. And what I found very interesting, that you said by the end of this formula, that was like before touring. No, it was something like until then we never, or we did not hit the road yet. And when I got into the music business closer and closer, and I was talking with some promoters, they said, yeah, it is not unusual, you can say, that record labels paying bands, managements, that they are taking smaller bands on their tour and doing a package so that they can be around. Was this also some point of that you, what you mean with this phrase at the end of this, let me say, formula, that the record label paid, I don't know, management specific amount of money so that he could tour, or do you remember that?
Yeah, so they do. So there's a few things. So they give you an advance of money when you sign the deal, which is supposed to be paid back through album sales, right? And or they call it recouped. So we also signed a publishing deal, which is a little bit strange because they help promote the band, and like I said, I think I said that before, that they get you into like TV and movies and different soundtracks or whatever, and even get you interviews and things like that to try to help promote through their network of contacts, right? And they give you another advance of money, but you don't have to take that deal. And some bands have famously not taken that deal. Like Guns N' Roses was one that like did not. They said they didn't want that deal, and they're really glad they didn't, because they've made way more money off each album sale as a result. But in a way, it's sort of like an insurance policy. So you get paid a little bit more money up front, and if the album's like a total flop and nothing happens, you at least made more money, because you don't have to actually personally pay back that money as the artist. They're taking a risk, you know, as the publisher and the record label. They're taking a risk, and if things go really well, they're going to make a lot of money. But if they don't, then it becomes, you know, an investment that didn't work out for them. But we don't personally owe the money back. So we did the publishing deal as well, sort of, yeah, like hedging our bets in a sense. Yeah, but then when we hit the road, so they go and they spend money on the album, like making the album, shooting a video, putting us on tour. So when we go on tour, the label pays for all that. All those things, like album, video, touring, all that, they all get essentially added up and added to the amount of money that we owe back through album sales, right? So when it was all said and done, I remember one of our managers saying, like, in order to recoup all of those costs, we would have had to sell like over 1 million albums, something like that, you know. which is crazy. And it also makes you think, oops, sorry. And that's part of why, like what I said earlier, where we don't see many bands after that period of time that had these big deals, especially in the harder rock scene, because the math just doesn't work out, you know? So from their investment standpoint, from a major label investment standpoint, it's really hard to get them to pay off. Because in the case of like a Papa Roach, it paid off great. You know, they sold something like 5 million albums off that first record, you know, and they probably spent a similar amount on them as they did with us before the album came out and everything, and it paid off really nicely for them. But there's a whole lot of other groups that come out where that doesn't happen. So, you know, I think even Alien Ant Farm, they had a decent success because of that song "Smooth Criminal," right? And sold a good amount of albums, and they probably made money off them too, but definitely not as much as Papa Roach. And you know, then they lose a bunch of money on us. So it's like at the end of the day, they need to figure out what makes sense business wise, you know. But yeah, I remember we had a conversation with our managers early on, like I think our first meeting with them, and they said basically you could do this two ways. You can go the indie route, which the bands on their labels do. They have like that label Side One Dummy, which is mostly a lot of punk rock bands and things like that. Not necessarily. They have a mix, but there was a lot of punk. And you know, they're like, you could do it that route and go like, it'll take a long time, but you'll build up kind of like a more organic following over a long time. You know, or you could go the major label route and try to just like, the phrase in America is like, go big or go home, right? So it will be wildly successful or it won't work at all. And so obviously the latter happened to us. But yeah, so that's part of the deal. And part of the reason that you see some of the bands that like had their first album come out and maybe didn't do much after that, because the money's just not there. So, you know, it's hard to convince people within a record label to reinvest in something that didn't work the first time, you know, unless they see some, you know, huge potential in a song or something like that. And so that's what we were up against, and a lot of other groups are up against, you know. But then you get the people like the bands like Papa Roach that had a huge breakout success, and then the industry starts changing. People start buying albums less, but they were stuck in a record deal. You know, I don't know all the specifics with them, but they probably had a similar deal to us, where it was like a 2-album deal, guaranteed, and then options for, I think ours was options for 3 more albums and a greatest hits album. That was in our contract. But we didn't have that choice. The label did. So in a case of like Papa Roach, they have this breakout success, and then they release another album and it does okay, but not as good. But probably well enough that the label says, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we give it another shot and like pick up the option for these other albums? You know, they have a good enough following. You know, people still really know them for their song "Last Resort," and like, you know, we can build off that. Maybe they had another song that sounded promising or something, and so they pick up the option. And now Papa Roach is just sort of stuck in this deal. And they, even though if they left the label and just went independent, they could make way more money individually off of it. But they can't. Legally, they can't. They're stuck in this contract. So then they have to play out the rest of the contract. And you see this a lot. Like there's a really good documentary called, I think it's called Artifact, if I remember right. It was Jared Leto from 30 Seconds to Mars produced it and directed it and everything, but it was about their story, and they got stuck in a very similar deal where they were just sort of like, okay, well, we got to crank out some albums so that we can get out from under this deal. You know, and then, you know, with the industry changing a lot, with you know, pirating of music, so people were buying things less, and then that obviously now it's streaming, so it's even changed in a different way. You know? So yeah, it's a really hard math equation to get to work right, and that's why, you know, for a long time. Like, it's just, you see these huge artists, and those are the ones that will, make all the money for the labels, and then they can use that to invest in these other ones that maybe one of them here and there will break out. Maybe 1 out of 10 will make them money. So I'm in the startup, like tech startup world now, and you see it's like venture capital, right, where they're investing in early stage companies, and not very many of them are going to break out really big, but you just need a couple to do really well to make a lot of money. So it's very similar in the music industry too.
Oh, and what do you think, especially from the last 20 years, about the whole change of the industry? I mean, you mentioned Napster, for instance, also what Lars said about Napster, or his intention. I remember a couple of years ago, Doyle from the Misfits, he said Lars did that not especially for themselves, of course, somehow, yes, but he did that for smaller bands, that they get more money, at least, or at least that those kind of companies never getting big, so that they can, let me say, push this pirate thing. And also about streaming is something interesting, because here in Germany there's a known metal band called Destruction. I don't know if you're familiar with thrash metal, and they are one of the big four here in Germany. Of the thrash metal, and their front singer, he is saying, streaming, the cut of Spotify, for instance, those 0.004 cents, just one stream, is completely ridiculous. On the other hand, I heard something interesting for a music promoter, manager, label owner. By the way, he was a touring manager of Black Map when they did their first tour here in Germany. So it's interesting how everything is connected together. And he said, for instance, about Spotify, it is depending on the musical genre, for instance, which genre is now up to date. Here in Germany and America, it is hip hop, trap, rap kind of thing, and not like 20 years ago metal or heavy rock. So the people are consuming more also on the streaming platform, because this is a big let me say, mass media, not CD anymore. This also means that rock and metal is not so important, so they less streaming that. And this also is meaning that they did not getting enough money, or much money. But he also said, on the other hand, is something interesting, because if a record is 15 years old or 20 years old, and a physical copy is just limited, let me say 1,000 copies. If they are selling 1,000 copies, it's gone. But when it's uploaded on Spotify, and it's, in a case of Destruction, one song has 6 million streams, and around above the other songs of that record, since are 7 songs, let me say the outcome is $20,000 just streaming of one record with 7 songs. This is 30 years old. That is much more in 5 years, when this band could sell physical copies, for instance. So on the other side, they are doing money from streaming. It is more than physical copies, but they are not relevant because of the genre, and the people are always listening also to older records, not new records. So I don't know, if I look into Metallica's Spotify list, top 5 songs, Slayer, it's more like the older songs, not Sankt Anger, for instance.
Well, it's interesting. Music is such an interesting art form in that sense, right? Because you can listen to it over and over again, right? I think it's, there's not many books I'm going to read over and over again. There's some movies I've watched over and over again, but not that much. Music's so unique in that sense, because you can listen to a song and it's 3, 4, 5 minutes or something. Or I guess if you listen to Tool, they're much longer. But but you can listen to them over and over. They give you the same feelings back that you had the first time you listened to it, or maybe you discover something new each time you listen, or whatever. And they can take you back to a moment of time in your life, right? I just wrote about this, so I've been writing a lot recently, If anyone's curious, I just set up just like an easy page. It's lyle.blog, real easy to find.
You have to send me this. I will put it up into the description on YouTube.
Nice. But I just wrote about this because music's so different in that sense. I have people still like yourself who reached out all these years later, and you were talking about hearing our song on the Tony Hawk soundtrack.
I was 14,
and you hear "Melt Me Down," and it takes you right back to when you were 14.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Which is so different than pretty much any other, like even like a painting or something is a lot different, right? And so like you're going to see an artist like that one you mentioned, was it Destructive or Destruction?
Destruction,
like yeah. So, they're singing a bunch of their older songs playing, and those are the ones that were popular probably at the time. And there's a bunch of people on there just want to hear the one that they know, But yeah, streaming in general, it is sort of a mixed bag because I love it as a consumer of music because I can get anything I want. I think back to, when we were coming up, and it was like, I remember going just like to the record store, and they had some CDs you could sample, but there was other ones I would just buy because I was like, it looked interesting, which is kind of crazy to think about now. I would never do that these days. But I discovered some artists back then. Maybe I wouldn't these days, but yeah, it's just so different. The people are probably listening to more music or more variety of music than they ever have. But there's less of that like relationship of the artists and their fan base. I think that's been harder to get going these days. Even like artists that are coming up from like a SoundCloud or something like that, and building up a following there, it's different. It was different than where we were playing shows and we were hanging out at like our merch booth afterwards, and we were talking to fans face to face, and we're like signing their record. They buy it from us with cash. It's like physical product. And I imagine you can relate to this. And kids like my stepdaughter, she's 11, almost 12, and she loves listening to music, but she just jumps all over the place. She barely ever listens to the end of a song, it seems. But I remember listening to music, maybe not at her age, maybe a little bit older, but you get the CD and you're like picking apart the jacket of the insert, and like reading the lyrics if they're in there, or like just learning about the band and kind of getting immersed in their little world that they created in this product. That just doesn't happen as much these days. It's more music is obviously still important to people, and it's a cultural thing, right? But there's less. I think there's less of that like relationship between the artists and the fans, or it's just different. And it's more like social media now, right? As opposed to feeling that more personal connection. I think when we were coming up, so I built our website, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was trying to build the website, and then but we had a message board on there where fans could just go talk about whatever, and we would chime in there and jump in there and talk to people, and we got to know people pretty well. And I remember going on tour and people saying like, "Hey, I'm so and so username from the message board," and it was like we bonded around that, and it felt really cool. And then I imagine it's a little bit harder to do that these days, through like whether it's like a Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever. It becomes like you're just another follower in a sense. I don't know. It felt something about it felt more intimate in the past. But yeah, I mean, it's streaming. I think, like I said, it's great in the sense that artists can get their stuff out there way more easily these days. You can record something at your house and you can get it sounding pretty good, just like with a laptop, and put it out there without much cost, to get it out in the world and try to promote it and see if you can get a following going. Which that's really cool. Sort of empowering the audience, the artist more, and giving them more control. That being said, it's way harder to get noticed these days, just because there's so much out there.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this from a writer's perspective now, doing my online writing, and eventually wanting to write a book about some other stuff. I might eventually write about the band more, but recently I've been writing about experience with my daughter, who's 2.5, and she has cerebral palsy and had a really tough start to her life, and I write a lot about that. But I just trying to get, even just like a fan base for that, has been really hard, just because there's so much content out there to consume now.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's hard to find the niche of people that would be into your stuff.
It's interesting what you said, because one of my friends, he's a metal YouTuber, and he did a small research, and he found out that in the last decade, from 2010 to 2019, the outcome on the heavy rock scene, it was the same amount when the amount from, I don't know, let me say, from the beginning or the middle of the 70s to 2009. You can say almost 4 decades pressed in 1 decade. From the outcome perspective is so much. Like you said, everybody can record stuff home. It's very, very cheap. The quality is very, very high. It's like, wow, okay, it's so much. Especially we are running.
All the gatekeepers have gone away, right? Like, so the gatekeepers, meaning like the record label executives or whoever, right? Like, you don't need to go through that anymore. You can just go directly. But also, I'm a big fan of the concept. There's a concept, at least within the tech world, called or creatives world, called the 1,000 true fans concept. I don't know if you're familiar, but the idea is if you can have 1,000 true fans that believe in everything you do and will spend around $100 a year on what you produce, that you can make a really good living. You can make $100,000 a year off 1,000 fans. So, you don't need to go out and sell 5 million albums off a hit song like Papa Roach did anymore. To at least make a decent living and put money on food on your table and money in your bank account. So the math equation is a lot different, right? But you're not going to have the fancy video or make the album in the nice studio and all these things that we got to do. But there's different ways to go about it. It's just a different scene, So I guess in a lot of ways there's more out there. There's more people trying to make it. But if they do it right, they don't need to have as big of an audience, and they can still do it well, and have more control and be able to do whatever the hell they want. Like we were kind of stuck. We were going like, we need to create a song that they're going to back. Whereas if we were just independent, we could just do whatever we wanted. It didn't matter. If we just said, you know what, we really like this. Maybe it's more heavy, but who cares? We like it. So that's what people can do nowadays is do what they want, follow their passion and whatever their artistic interests are.
I see. I have 3 questions left. Next question.
I do have to go in 15 minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. What are the guys in the band, including you? What are you doing? You said you are writing, you're in the tech business. What else are you doing, and what are the other guys doing at the moment?
So I'm writing a lot. I write a weekly, I guess, blog posts. Some of them are like I said, stories about this experience I've had with my daughter over the last 2.5 years. And they're written in a particular style that would be called kind of like memoir style. So the idea being that I'm going to take those and adapt them into a longer book form eventually. Not sure, that'll probably take a while to create, but in the meantime, I'm trying to build an audience of folks who like my writing. And yeah, so like I said, that's at lyle.blog. It's just like a simple sign up page. But yeah, in addition to that, so yeah, I work in the tech industry doing like account management. It's really not that interesting, to be honest. But you know, I can make good money, and it gives me some flexibility to jump on things like this and to you know, work on my writing a lot. Yeah, but I have a, you know, family, wife, and my daughter, and then my stepdaughter at home. I live in Sonoma, California. So we used to live in Santa Barbara, so it's you know, quite a bit away from that. I'm up in Northern California now. But yeah, I think, I don't know if you said this before we came on, but our singer Adam is now either a vice principal or a principal, I forget, at a school in Vacaville. I'm pretty sure it's in Vacaville, California, which is, you know, probably close to an hour from me. But yeah, so he's been doing that for a while. I remember when he left the band, he went back to school, and then he ended up getting a PhD in education, which his dad also had, and his brother Chris, who I mentioned early on, went into teaching as well. So it's kind of like that's what their family does, apparently. So, and then Mark, one of our guitarists, I'm pretty sure he's doing like IT type work, so he's sort of in the tech industry as well. Joe, the other guitarist who was originally on the turntables, he is a cop now. I actually heard that he's what's called a foot patrol cop, which is that little town I mentioned next to the university called Isla Vista. There were these people. There was a police officers there called the Isla Vista Foot Patrol, and they were the ones that would come and break up parties and stuff like that. And you know, I remember we had some run-ins with them when we were playing shows, and we were probably playing past curfew hours and stuff. So yeah, so he's doing that now, which is surprising to me. So kind of funny how things come full circle in that sense. But and then his brother Tom, who played drums when we were on the road, he lives actually not very far from me at all, like not even 30 minutes. I'm pretty sure last I heard he works at a lab at UC San Francisco, so UCSF. Not exactly sure what he's doing there, but yeah, he's now married to his girlfriend that he had at the time when we were in the band. So they've been together a long time. Yeah. Yeah, so we're all kind of, I think we're all in California, so we're all in the same state, but we're all kind of just around different areas of the state. I'm pretty sure, yeah, like Mark is, I think, still down near Santa Barbara, if I remember right. So him and Joe are down there still, but yeah.
Nice. So everybody is now, let me say, have a regular day job and is not doing music anymore. Or besides, I don't know, do you play sometimes still bass or something?
Here and there. I still have the bass that I used on most of the album. And my favorite one from when we were touring. It's hanging up in my living room on the wall. But I joked the other day to someone. I said, yeah, it was nice. It's nice having that there, but I wish I had a gold or platinum record instead. Yeah, so the company I work at now, when it like pre-COVID times, we would go to the office I worked in Sausalito, which is just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. We have this really nice office. It's right on the water, and our CEO plays guitar and sings, and our CTO is the drummer. And so we would jam in there. We had all our equipment in there in the office, and so we play usually like once a week. But usually we play like cover songs and things like that. It was just more just fun. I think we played one live show at a little town at this little bar on like a Tuesday night, and it was fun. But you know, I think for a long time I was like, I'll never play cover songs because I don't know. I just thought like sometimes you see people doing that, and I always thought it was like a little sad that they're like playing cover songs, you know, especially if it's like more popular radio cover songs, because I was never really into that stuff. So But you know, we had fun, and it's just nice to play every once in a while. But beyond that, I've done some stuff just on my computer. I've goofed around with a program called Ableton and making different, kind of electronic stuff. But I have recorded some live guitar and bass on them in there, but nothing like Pressure 4.5. It's more like it's less heavy. But mostly I was trying to learn the program. I have a bunch of unfinished stuff, basically.
Nice. So yeah, I see our time's running out, and there's one question left, and it's about your first, last, or a crazy mosh pit experience, because we call ourselves mosh pit experience, and that is always our last question. Do we have maybe something to tell?
Let me think. So I think I barely ever would like go into mosh pit, even when I would go to shows. I always thought they were a little bit funny, because I don't know, you get some people in there and you're like, wow, you're really like taking out your aggression, and like maybe you need to go talk to a therapist. But anyway, the moment that came to mind immediately when you mentioned it was a show we played in. It was in Syracuse, New York. It was off date from Ozfest. It was this huge radio festival show put on by I think it was whatever the rock station is in New York, K-Rock or something. But I remember we were one of the first bands that went on, and we played in front of like 10,000 or maybe even 15,000 people. It was a lot of people. And then, and the crowd was like really getting into it with us, which was cool. But then I remember Taproot play a little later, and the crowd was getting bigger. And at one point during their set, there was this guy crowd surfing in a wheelchair. He was sitting in a wheelchair, and the crowd passing him around. And then they get him up on the stage, and he's wheeling around on stage. They're in the middle of a song, and the singer Steven was like patting the guy in the back and like, getting all amped up. And then the guy, I remember, goes back kind of like by where the amps and the drums were, and then he just like books it, like he gets all this speed going. He went off the edge of the stage, and the crowd grabbed him like in midair, like he went flying in his chair. And I remember Steven just had this look on his face like, oh crap, like this guy's gonna hurt himself, but yeah, that was probably the craziest mosh pit thing I ever saw.
Crazy, man. That's crazy.
Cool. Yeah.
So
like,
yeah,
that guy's nuts.
So yeah, thank you very, very much for your time, for the whole stories you shared with us here on the Twitch live stream. And for you guys out there, take a look down the comment section. I will link your blog down there. And like I said before, thank you very, very much for the time here. The first time I got in touch with you was when I was 14. In 2002, it was a Tony Hawk sampler, and now nearly 19 years later, we got in contact. So it's a bless of media. So it's crazy sometimes. And for our viewers out there and who are also following our channel, Moshpit Passion on YouTube, they know Pressure 425, Burning the Process is one of my favorite records, which I can turn on every time. It's not getting boring or something like that. It's, for me, still a classic one. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for you guys out there. And we see you next time. So yeah, Lyle, see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Absolutely. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate you reaching out.
Thank you, man.